The cafe was small and warm, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, the kind of place people passed without noticing unless they were tired enough to need it. The bell above the door chimed softly as Daniel stepped inside, the sound barely cutting through the low murmur of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. He adjusted his grip on his briefcase, shoulders tense, eyes already scanning for an empty seat. There were none. Every table was occupied by couples leaning close, freelancers hunched over laptops, or friends laughing like the world wasn't heavy. Daniel felt invisible among them, just another man in a suit carrying more silence than coffee. He ordered his usual without looking at the menu. The barista knew his face, knew he always stood by the counter, staring through the window as if waiting for something to change outside. Standing was easier. Sitting meant staying, and staying meant feeling how empty things had become since his wife's death. His phone buzzed with work emails, but he ignored them. For once, business wasn't what made his chest ache. That was when he noticed the girl. She sat by the window in a wheelchair, sunlight resting gently on her hair. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, and beside her was an empty chair. On that chair lay a folded napkin, carefully placed, like a promise. She watched the door, not impatiently, but with quiet hope, the kind that looks fragile if you stare at it too long. When Daniel turned slightly, she met his eyes. Instead of looking away, she smiled. It wasn't wide or forced, just enough to be brave. "Sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I saved this seat for you." Daniel froze, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry," he asked. She pointed to the chair. "You're always standing." "Every morning." Her cheeks flushed as if she worried she'd said too much. "I thought, maybe today you could sit." Something shifted inside him, unexpected and sharp. He glanced around, half expecting someone else to step forward, someone she actually meant. But no one did. Slowly, unsure why his hands were trembling, Daniel pulled the chair back and sat down. "I didn't know I was being watched," he said quietly. She laughed, a small sound like wind chimes. "I watch people a lot. When you sit, it means you're staying." Daniel noticed the napkin now. A small paper heart was drawn on it in red pen, slightly uneven, as if her hand had shaken. She pushed it toward him. "No one should drink coffee alone," she said. He swallowed hard, nodding once. "Thank you. My name is Lily," she added after a moment. "I come here while my mom works. She says the cafe is safe." "I'm Daniel," he replied. For the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not pain, not loss, but the quiet beginning of being seen. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than usual, surprising himself by how quickly his steps carried him toward the cafe. He told himself it was coincidence, habit, nothing more, but when he pushed open the door, his eyes immediately searched the window table. Lily was already there. The empty chair beside her waited again, turned slightly outward, as if it had been expecting him all night. She noticed him instantly and smiled, relief softening her face. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "You came," she said. "I did," he replied, setting his briefcase down more gently than he ever had before. He sat without being asked this time, as though the chair now belonged to him. They shared their coffee and cocoa in quiet comfort. Outside, the city rushed past, but inside, time slowed. Lily pulled a small notebook from her bag and began to draw while Daniel stirred his coffee, watching her from the corner of his eye. "What are you drawing today?" he asked. "Suns," she said simply. "They always come back." Daniel nodded, though the word struck deeper than she probably knew. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you come here every day?" She shrugged lightly. "Most days. My mom cleans offices nearby. She says waiting is easier when there's people around." Daniel glanced at her wheelchair, then quickly back to her face, afraid of staring too long. "Is school?" "I do it online now," she answered, unfazed. "My legs don't like me very much." She said it with a soft smile, but her fingers tightened around the pen. "Doctors say maybe someday." Daniel felt the familiar ache of helplessness, the same one he felt when Ethan cried at night asking for his mother. "You're very brave," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I'm just still here." Days turned into a pattern. Daniel and Lily talked about small things at first, favorite desserts, silly stories, the way pigeons walked like they owned the sidewalk. Slowly, the conversations grew heavier. Lily told him about the hospital rooms that smelled like soap and sadness, about how her father stopped visiting once the wheelchair came. Daniel told her about Ethan, about bedtime stories read to an empty side of the bed, about a house that echoed too much on weekends. One morning, Lily didn't smile when he arrived. Her notebook stayed closed. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Mom says the cafe might close. The owner's sick. If it does, I won't have anywhere to wait." The thought hit him harder than expected. This place, this seat, had become more than coffee. It had become a bridge between two lonely lives. Daniel reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand, unsure if it was okay. "No matter what happens," he said carefully, "you won't be alone." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Promise?" He nodded, meaning it more deeply than any contract he'd ever signed. And in that moment, surrounded by clinking cups and quiet warmth, Daniel realized something profound. Sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing what's broken, but from sitting down and staying. The third morning came wrapped in rain, the kind that blurred the city into streaks of gray and made even the cafe feel hushed. Daniel arrived later than usual, soaked despite the umbrella, a strange unease pressing against his ribs. As he pushed the door open, his heart sank. The window table was empty. No wheelchair. No blue cardigan. No folded napkin waiting like a promise. He stood there longer than he meant to, rainwater dripping onto the floor, until the barista cleared her throat gently. "You're looking for the little girl," she said. "Hospital called her mom last night. She won't be in for a while." Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't remember thanking the barista, or even picking up his coffee. He only remembered the drive that followed, hands gripping the steering wheel, Lily's quiet voice echoing in his head. "When you sit, it means you're staying." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Daniel walked the halls like a man who didn't belong there but refused to turn back. When he found Lily's room, she was pale against the white sheets, a stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her arm. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw him. "You found me," she whispered. "I told you," Daniel said, pulling a chair close to her bed. His voice broke despite his effort. "I don't leave." Lily smiled weakly. "I was scared you'd forget the seat." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded napkin, the paper heart slightly worn now. "I kept it," he said. "Just in case you needed proof." Tears slid down her cheeks. "Can you tell me about Ethan?" So he did. He told her about lost socks and bedtime protests, about the way his son still saved space on the couch for his mom. Lily listened like every word mattered. Over the following weeks, Daniel returned every evening. He brought Ethan, who read comics aloud and taped Lily's son drawings to the wall. Laughter slowly replaced the beeping machines. Daniel spoke quietly to doctors, asked careful questions, signed papers he pretended were business-related. Treatment came, then therapy, then hope. Months later, sunlight filled the cafe again. Lily stood at the window on unsteady legs, braces shining beneath her dress. The wheelchair rested nearby, unused for the moment. Daniel sat in the familiar chair, his coffee untouched, heart pounding. She took one careful step, then another, until she reached the table. Placing the napkin down, she smiled up at him. "I saved this seat for you," she said. Daniel stood, tears-free this time, and opened his arms. Around them, the cafe continued as always, but for two once lonely hearts, everything had finally changed.